During the procession, something interesting about the coach that is carrying the royal parade and the President of the United States and the First Lady, the Trumps, the King, the Queen, the Prince and the Princess of Wales have stepped onto their royal carriages. Coach 1, first in the procession, will be King Charles and President Trump, who are traveling in the Irish state coach. Coach 2 will be their respective wives, Queen Camilla and the First Lady, Melania Trump, together in the Scottish state coach. Coach 3, in the next carriage, a semi-state London model, will be the Prince and Princess of Wales, joined by the US Ambassador and his wife. Coach 4, following WION, were some of the most senior figures in Trump's administration, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Overseas Envoy Steve Witkoff, traveling in an escort London coach. Finally, a second escort London coach will carry senior assistants to the President and the First Lady. So the procession has already begun. They are heading to the castle, where a guard of honor will greet the party, who the King will invite Trump to join him in inspecting. There will also be a fly past by the UK and US F-35 military jets and the Red Arrows. Following a state lunch, the President will pay his respects to the late Queen in private before a short tour of St. George's Chapel. That evening, a traditional state banquet will be held at the castle, during which both the King and President will deliver their speeches. So it is official. President Trump has begun his state visit to the United Kingdom. If you're just joining us, this is the state visit by US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump to the United Kingdom, and the procession has already begun. As you can see on your screens, what will follow next is a flurry of activity. Once at the castle, a guard of honor will greet the party, who the King will invite Trump to join him in inspecting. There will also be a fly past by UK and US F-35 military jets and the Red Arrows. Following a state lunch, the President will pay his respects to the late Queen in private before a short tour of St. George's Chapel. That evening, or later this evening, a traditional state banquet will be held at the castle, during which both the King and the President will deliver their speeches.
दे दोनों को। All right, so U.S. President Donald Trump in Britain for that unprecedented second state visit. The UK government rolling out the royal red carpet for the leader. This is a crucial visit, of course, coming at a very significant time as well. U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump kicking off their first full day of that historic second state visit to Britain, welcomed by the Prince and Princess of Wales. This is also a grand security operation, remember, around the royal residence. Let's go straight across now to our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, who's been tracking those developments for us. Susan, just explain to our viewers, first of all, the significance of what we are witnessing at this point. You know, the fact that this is an unprecedented, historic second state visit to Britain taking place.
Right, it really is, Molly. And when President Trump did arrive at Windsor Castle in this royal carriage, he was really heralded by 3 separate military bands and escorted by riders on horseback. And of course, the host is King Charles III, in some ways really repaying a nearly 37-year-old favor. And the reason I say that is because just back in 1988, then Prince of Wales was a guest for tea at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's own mansion in Palm Beach, Florida, and the visit offered, you know, President Trump really this royal connection. That's why he keeps saying King Charles is my very good friend, even if Charles elected to spend the night at a horse ranch and not at Mar-a-Lago at that time. Yes, it's long reverent of the British royal family, and Trump's visit to the United Kingdom really offers a similar opportunity, a stamp of validation applied with honor guards and a state banquet, and from some of the same people who he holds genuine to the point of unwavering respect. So it is very unprecedented. Usually each president has one state visit. Despite the fact that they may be elected twice, this is very unusual circumstances, but nonetheless, it's just absolutely extraordinary to watch, just the ceremony and everything. And it's, you know, it's a time that not only they sort of reassess UK-US relations, you know, with all the tariffs and everything that's going on. That's going to be later on this week politically, but just the pageantry itself is very interesting to see that King Charles has done this for a U.S. president.
Right, and for our viewers who might just be tuning in, Susan, if you can just lay out also what is expected to unfold over the next few hours.
Right, so it is a jam-packed day. We have this arrival ceremony, and then we are going to expect a private luncheon, and then we're going to see at 3 p.m. St. George's Chapel and wreath laying at the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II. The press pool is going to be there, although we've been told that it's going to be a private sort of event. And then later on, the beating retreat of military ceremony, followed by a fly past F-35s and red arrows. And then it'll wrap up with the big state banquet. That's very restricted, of course, to the press, but we are going to get a glimpse of that. And that's going to be the day for today. No speeches or no talking to the camera. None of that is going to happen. The ceremonies are mostly going to happen today.
Right, Susan, we're also, you know, getting in the inputs about the kind of security arrangements that have been undertaken, of course, given the given the concerns around the demonstrations that have been organized by Stop the Trump coalition. So this, of course, is a grand security operation. Let's also talk about the very fact that this is coming at a very crucial time. The optics of it aside, we are talking about the red carpet being laid out for the US President and the First Lady at a time like this, when we are looking at a lot of the conversations that have been taking place between the US and the UK on a lot of sensitive issues.
Yes, very, very, very important indeed. You talked about a security presence for Donald Trump. Really, the murder of Charlie Kirk increased pressure on police plans, while the Epstein case cast a shadow over U.S. President's trip. As we saw demonstrators taking part, of course, you had the ambassador Peter Nettleson being recalled as well. It really is a significant time, but there is also those political implications that you mentioned, and I think we're going to hear more about that tomorrow when he visits Keir Starmer and then he has a press conference. I think we'll get a better understanding on where the country stands. But nonetheless, this pageantry and ceremony on the one hand, but then, of course, business as usual, so to say, on the other.
All right. Leaving it there for the moment, Susan, thanks very much for those inputs. Let's continue to play out for our viewers the latest images coming in from Windsor Castle.
And the Scots Guards are present and awaiting your attention.
General salute! Present! Close order! March! Gardevala will move to the left in threes. Form threes! Left! the right file, right pass. King's bodyguard, by the centre.
All right, so the UK rolling out that royal carpet for US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, that grand procession. Of course, a huge show of pomp and pageantry. This is an unprecedented second historic state visit that's taking place.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at wion.com.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
and welcome. You're watching WION World as One with me, Hem Korsara, and this is Business Insights, a show where we cut through the noise, get you the latest from the world of business. Here's a quick look at all of the latest developments. Let's get started. Indian markets close higher. The Nifty closes above 25,300 points, while the Sensex ends above 82,000 points. European markets trade mixed as investors track the Fed's rate announcement today. German stocks lead gains, French stocks underperform. It's a volatile trading session in the commodity markets. Crude oil futures slid over 1%, Brent just below $68 a barrel. Gold retreats from record highs as the spotlight shifts to US monetary policy. Later today, silver, platinum and palladium underperform, down over 2%. Now, Asian shares hit their first record high in almost 4 years, with less dependence on China expected to support the rally's durability. The latest rally in Asia mirrors a record-breaking bull run on Wall Street ahead of a key Fed decision later on Wednesday. India's boom, Taiwan's chip dominance and Japan's reform push have lured some global funds away from China. The result is the regional market has become an investment in multiple winners and themes rather than a bet focused on one anchor country. The new investor diversity has muted worries about bubble warnings seen after the last peak over 5 years ago. Reasonably modest valuations, earnings progress in the semiconductor sector, and regulatory support across the region have eased concerns about froth. US stocks have also been on the rise, with Wall Street benchmarks setting a start of records just June thanks to the AI investing fever and anticipation of a Fed rate cut. Asia is delivering better results this year despite a $14 trillion rally in US stocks. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index has climbed 22% to a record high. China remains systematically important, and a rebound in its internet giants has been a major driver of the Asian stock gauge. What's boosting the Asia Index is fresh records in Japanese, South Korean and Taiwanese markets. The key Asian equity index has been reshaped since its last peak as investors shifted flows following a host of global events. China's property crisis and geopolitical frictions with the US have seen its weighting drop to 16.4% from 20.7%. Hong Kong has nearly halved to 5.5%. India's share has almost doubled to 10.7%. Reforms, a growing middle class, and rising inflows from domestic investors has boosted India's appeal. Taiwan's weighting has jumped to 12.6% from 8.9%, and that highlights the importance of Taiwan's semiconductor industry to the global economy. Japan's share has also edged higher. And have you ever been pushed to buy a financial product you didn't fully understand? This practice is called mis-selling, and data shows it is on the rise in India. From big cities to small towns, customers are promised big returns only to be locked into products that don't suit them. Though regulators call it a disturbing trend, today we break down the data, the patterns, and most importantly, how you can protect yourself. According to the Economic Survey 2024, insurance is among the most mis-sold financial products by banks, but other instruments are also mis-sold. For example, a senior citizen seeking a safe fixed deposit may be sold a complex unit-linked insurance plan, or a loan may be bundled with an insurance policy. A mutual fund can be marketed as zero risk. The list goes on. But many customers realize that only later, after their money is locked for years with hidden charges. But why does this happen? Relationship managers and agents are under constant pressure to meet sales targets. A report by WION Finance in October 2024 found that 57% of bank staff admitted to selling products even if they did not suit the customer. And to add to that, India's low financial literacy, according to 2023 S&P Global Survey, only 27% of adults know their way around money matters. The data speaks for itself, of course. The Securities and Exchange Board of India recorded over 12,000 complaints about mis-sold insurance-linked products in financial year 24. The Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India reported an 18% jump in life insurance mis-selling complaints the same year. And the Central Bank of India said consumer complaints against banks rose by 15% in financial year 24, with mis-selling among the top reasons. Experts suggest simple steps to avoid being mis-sold. Always ask for a one-page disclosure before signing. Be wary of promises of guaranteed returns. Keep emails, call logs and receipts as proof. And if you are mis-sold, escalate your complaint first to the bank. If not solved, then approach the regulatory body's grievance desk. Now, the lack of an agreement on certain agricultural goods has become a thorn in US trade deals with India and China. And if one were to consider Donald Trump's rhetoric of tariffs as a threat to secure deals, India and China have held their own. At the center of the standoff between the Asian giants and the US are corn and soybeans. Differences over agri-trade is at the heart of the trade dispute, with the US continually pressing for India to open its markets, particularly after being shut out by China, which has begun to buy corn and soybeans from Brazil. That has thrown the US agricultural sector into a crisis. The debate also rages on about US demands for countries buying staple American crops. Farmer sustainability is at the heart of trade negotiations between the United States and the Asian giants.
This whole scheme of taking a sledgehammer, namely tariffs, to solve any problem, whether it be trade deficits or whether it be the war in Ukraine and Russia, is without foundation. And we hope that we can get back to a semblance of a multilateral trade approach, which has served India and the United States so well. What is obscured here is that basically this approach destroys the World Trade Organization and the multilateral system which has been in effect since World War II.
Now, during the standoff between the United States and China earlier this year, when both countries engaged in a battle of imposing higher trade tariffs on each other, China pulled the plug on soybean purchases from America. That has hurt American farmers, who have lost out on billions of dollars from China's snub of US soybeans. Some analysts have called China's move a crisis for American farmers. Soybean is said to be among the top items for discussion during Friday's call between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Bulk purchases of American goods are at a critical part of the Chinese deliverables for a trade deal with the United States. While India was the first out of the door to offer Trump some concessions for a trade deal when he took office, the discussions fell through. The agricultural goods at the center of the standoff. As a result, Trump announced 25% reciprocal tariffs on Indian imports and an additional 25% penalty on buying Russian oil. But India stood its ground. While Trump has softened his stance in recent days, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick warned that India will lose access to American markets unless it buys US corn. However, India has repeatedly pointed to country's priority of protecting its farmers. And Donald Trump has extended a delay on enforcing the ban against TikTok, marking the fourth postponement of a law aimed at forcing the sale of popular apps' US business from its Chinese owner. This move follows a tentative deal reached between US and China on TikTok's future in America. TikTok, with nearly 2 billion global users, has faced mounting pressure from US officials concerned about national security risks tied to its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. The US government is worried that user data could be accessed by Beijing, prompting legislation signed in 2024 by former President Joe Biden aiming to ban the app in America. But current President Donald Trump, who heavily relies on social media for his 2024 campaign, has expressed fondness for TikTok. On Tuesday, he signed an executive order extending the TikTok ban delay until the 16th of December. Fourth such postponement after delays in January, April, then in June. That prevents the US Justice Department from taking enforcement action not only now but retroactively for any TikTok activities since January 19th of this year, the day before Trump's inauguration. Without this extension, TikTok would have been forced to cease US operations starting Wednesday. The delay follows a framework agreement reached in Madrid between US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Li Hefeng. The deal outlines a new ownership structure for TikTok's US business to address security concerns, with a consortium of US investors, including Oracle and Andreessen Horowitz, set to control approximately 80% of the company. Under this plan, Chinese owners would retain less than 20% ownership, complying with US laws designed to limit Chinese influence. Oracle already manages significant parts of TikTok's US infrastructure, reinforcing data security claims. However, one key unresolved issue remains: the fate of TikTok's powerful recommendation algorithm, which is central to the app's success. Both US and Chinese officials continue discussions on how to handle this technology transfer and intellectual property. Trump expressed optimism about the deal, saying the plans to speak with China's President Xi Jinping to finalize the agreement. He also hinted at several major companies eager to buy TikTok's US operations, saying he'd hate to see the app's value thrown out of the window. The TikTok deal highlights the ongoing complexities of the US-China relations and challenge of balancing national security with business interests. With the ban delay now extended until December, all eyes will be on the upcoming discussions between the two nations on whether TikTok can continue operating in the US under this new framework. All right, and amid the global tariff pressure, US consumers will now have to bear the burden of it too. Footwear prices in the US are heading upwards. Companies that once relied on stockpiles of dodged tariff costs are now facing a reality check. With import duties on new shipments soaring, retailers are starting to pass the burden to shoppers. And it's not just shoes, other everyday goods are also getting costlier. Now, according to the Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America, the industry's tariff bill has jumped from an annual $3 billion to nearly $5 billion this year. Import duties of up to 50% are now being paid on new shipments. For months, companies stockpiled extra inventory to shield customers from higher costs, but those warehouses are now running low. And new containers arriving from China, Mexico, India and Indonesia are coming in at far higher costs. Meanwhile, women's footwear is seeing the earliest price hikes since fashion trends made it harder to stock ahead of tariffs. Beyond shoes, the ripple effect is spreading across various commodities. Raw materials such as leather, rubber, textiles all climbing up. Electronics, clothing and furniture importers are also warning of price pressures. For consumers, this means the cost of everyday goods may keep climbing through the year. Meanwhile, the footwear sector